Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today we're going to talk about secrecy. So in this show, we dismantle everything down to its core. That is, if we get our way. I've been thinking about a Secret Society episode for quite some time, but what would that episode be, really? It would be me watching a bunch of videos and regurgitating it to you, which... why do that? I would be adding maybe 2% more than what you would see from any other video online. If I knew something you didn't, then maybe I'd make that video. But I was eating dinner with my business partner the other day, and I met this bartender, and we started talking about religion for a split second, which I have no idea how on earth that would happen in public, but it did. And she just looked at me and she said, I don't trust organizations that live in secrecy. And it just hit me, just boom, right away. This episode just started to germinate in my brain. And it really comes down to that statement. When things have to live in secret to exist, society as a whole has got a problem. And it could be a double-edged sword. Society has a problem that there might be a secret cabal that is doing something against society, but it could be that society has so degraded that the intellectuals of the world feel it necessary to hide in order to draft plans to pull society out of some horrible state. But I'm going to ask the ridiculous question that I don't think anyone asks anymore. What is a secret? What is secret? What is that? Of course, the knee-jerk definition is, well, it's when someone hides what they're doing or hides something from either someone else or themselves. Can't deny anyone that definition, but when it comes to societies and how they work, what does it mean? Why did it start? Why would anything be secret? Now, how many times have you in your lifetime been accused of hiding something from someone and you absolutely positively took no measure to conceal what you were doing from the person who's complaining? But in the end, when you pull up the circumstantial evidence, you look around and you go, oh shit, yeah, I guess you weren't there my whole life. You weren't in every room that I've been in. You weren't present during every conversation that I've had. And so, of course, if I happen to engage life without you present, to you, if you want to be cynical, it's a secret. I operated in secret away from you. But when does it matter? When does it matter that someone says something or engages life when you're not present? Only when it involves you. It only matters when it involves you. Someone is discussing things about you and you're not present. Now, obviously, there's a huge level of granularity between someone mentioning your name and saying nice things to someone saying that person shouldn't exist. That's the extreme, right? I guess the other extreme would be, this person's amazing. So where is secrecy a problem in this society right now? 2016. We have organizations that plot against man every single day. And what's interesting is they come in all different degrees. One of them is a marketing department. And I don't mean to bash marketing people if you're out there. But a marketing department's entire goal is to conspire against mankind to make them desire objects that perhaps they don't need. Then you have small independent organizations which are affiliated with no government. And the distinction there is that no matter how much you vote, you can't affect this group. And that group can think tank a good thought towards mankind or really bad thought towards mankind. And then you have government institutions that are linked to the voting populace at some level. And they can conspire. And they can do things in secret. Before I forget, let me give you an example of where the internals of these organizations can start to fracture. Take the NSA. not really law-abiding because the Constitution of the United States has been violated by the Military Commissions Act, which mandates the violation of the Fourth Amendment to eavesdrop on us. We do have a Constitution. We do have a Fourth Amendment. It says not to eavesdrop. We've built an organization that does exactly that, right? Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing how ridiculously stupid we are. And to have someone say, I am an extra patriot soldier of this country because I'm going to extra survey everyone. It's just an oxymoron. It is literally the emperor has no clothes. It's a total cognitive dissonance moment if there ever was one, right? We take your average NSA employee. You do have very patriotic people who get these jobs. They really do believe the hype that they're doing us far more good than harm. And maybe they are. Who knows, right? Because they're secret, we'll never know. But I've met some of these folks. The only thing I would say that is an absolute common denominator of folks that are from the NSA that I've met is that official stories are ironclad. Once official story comes out, they have no discerning ability, and I mean physical, cognitive ability to see anything other than what they're told. They're so compartmentalized and pre-censored and pre-tested that they just can't do it. And the other one is that they are almost purely left brain. Purely left brain. One of the guys did tell me that he went into the I guess surveillance group. This guy was long retired when I talked to him, and it was a long time ago, but he said he really got in there and was trying to work extra hard. Well, he was just a little soldier, and he said they pulled him aside and said, "Kid, you're making us look bad. Sit down. When it turns 5 o'clock, you leave, Don't work through your lunch break." But the other type of employee is like, imagine you get tools. And if Edward Snowden did anything, it was that he revealed that consulting firms are hired by these organizations to handle the amazing overflow of surveillance. Because breaking the Constitution and violating the Constitution is a big job, But these guys have tools that you've never seen before. I'd probably guess 75% of you watching this show know all about them. And 25% will be, what? And this isn't going to be a big surveillance redo because I just did the surveillance episode. But, imagine a guy in secret using tools to get himself off. Because he can look through any cell phone, any computer, any television camera, any camera on planet Earth. He can listen to any microphone that he wants to, whenever he wants to. And as much as Hollywood portrays this stuff as needing a search warrant, these guys don't need shit. They will never have to talk to a judge to do anything other than physically seize your computer at your house because they already know what's on it. I mean, unless you've disconnected it from the world. So imagine secrecy going down to a personal gain level. It's not part of a bigger organization. But now let's go back to the species of secret groups that have no connection to the people. Meaning your vote will never touch them. Now we have groups like Skull and Bones. We have groups like Bohemian Grove. And they're pretty tight entities. One's just sort of an alumni group that once you have the little alumni ring and the secret handshake or whatever, you get a lot of business done. And you have access to things you wouldn't have access to if you hadn't gone to Yale. Bohemian Grove, well, it happens every single year, the same exact location, the same exact rituals happen. Again, I've got buddies of mine that say that they've got friends that have gone, and it's been nothing more than eat the most amazing meals in your life and smoke the most amazing cigars you've ever smoked. No weird, gay escapades in the forest. No super cabal conversations where they're designing the next, global weapon or whatever. So it might just be a good shindig nowadays. I do trust that, Anytime you get some of those guys alone, there's going to be hanky-panky that is kept secret from the rest of the group. But what about things like the Bilderberg Group? The Bilderberg Group is an organization with a membership where it is really a distribution hub, where once a year they come together and try to listen to other people's opinions, supposedly. And if you really think about it, if you were the ruling class, a banking cartel family member, and you're like, well, I want to craft the world to be what I want it to be, and as long as money can buy it, I got the paycheck, baby. But then the question becomes, what would you do to get what you wanted? Because you can't just say, I really wish that country didn't exist. I wish that guy didn't exist. And there's a bunch of people in the room that could go, yes, sir, no, sir. But they still have to know what to do. There's a climate in the world of consciousness that they're very much aware of, and it's regional and localized. So in order to manipulate the Chinese people, they have to know the Chinese local dispositions. Then there's very advanced domesticated China, and then there's very rural agricultural China. And this goes on and on for every country on planet Earth. And so if you think about the Bilderberg meeting and sort of the harvesting of opinions, what's really funny about the whole thing is that they invite a bunch of blowhards that have so little to do with society that their value is really negligible. Think of like Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, who used Texas taxpayer dollars to fly to Istanbul to attend the Bilderberg meeting, which, by the way, violates the Logan Act. He was an acting politician engaging in a foreign conversation of which was not transcribed. We don't allow secrecy as a result of the Logan Act, because someone could be the President of the United States and go behind closed doors and negotiate away everything that's our rights and what we've become. Rick Perry runs over there and I guess represents Texas. And he's an ex-pharmaceutical lobbyist, and he's the guy that made mandatory vaccinations in Texas. I mean, it's just amazing how these guys go, I used to work for the prison system, and now I become governor of the state. I build the maximum number of prisons I possibly could in my term, and nobody connects the dots. It's really sad. People do connect the dots, but they don't get any press. But now, what agenda do you think Rick could contribute to their agenda? I'm going to say Rick doesn't know what a gallon of milk costs. I don't think he has the slightest idea what it's like to be a normal citizen in this country. So I really doubt that they would ever bring him to their table to express his opinion of anything. When you hire dipshits to be politicians, the last thing you want to do is listen to them run their mouth. So they're there to feel like they're involved in something, and all they're really doing there is taking their marching orders and going back home. And to feel privileged. That's the reward. Now, what's interesting about these secret societies, that I want to note, is that in all my experience of having conversations with people who've been next to them, there's always an opening to bring someone into the fold. So it's like, if you're a member, you can invite me. You can invite another member. Sometimes they have more qualifications than that, but it's usually not that much. It's usually a qualification like, well, you have to have two members vouch for one guy to come in and, listen to what's going on inside. I've been involved in a couple on a single occasion. We're sort of a think tank. And you go in, and you have to be sponsored by at least one person to get in. And I had several friends that work for this particular, not work for, but are part of this particular think tank in Los Angeles. I was very excited to go in because they're just all brilliant people. And they had probably the worst speaker in the whole history of the think tank, because they usually invite one person in to give a presentation. And this particular day, I'm sure the rest of them are fine. This particular day, the guy had no idea where he was. I mean, he was lecturing some of the most brilliant minds in the United States of America as if we hadn't graduated high school. Just really lost in his thing. In fact, the guy who was running the show, he runs the think tank, cut him off right in the middle of his presentation, said, okay, we're done with you. But then when I started mingling, you start to realize that it's pretty much everyone trying to push their business card in your face, and they want you to hear what they have to say. But when you start talking, sorry, I gotta go. I gotta talk to this other guy. And I watched everyone do it to each other. It's just wild. So that was the last time I went. But now someone could say that think tank is actually incubating something. And what was really funny about this particular group is that the guy that runs the think tank, I think, is a complete PSYOP agent. I completely think he's a PSYOP agent. He runs the show for about 10 to 15 minutes with his presentation, essentially he pumped ISIS and Al-Qaeda and just a bunch of like make-believe crap as legit for 5 to 15 minutes. And I'm sitting in this room going, I got guys in here that look pretty damn hip. Is anyone buying this bullshit? And why is a think tank that's supposed to be all about business talking about a terrorist organization? What the guy did was he tried to say that ISIS was a brilliant agency that figured out how to leverage the media to become really wealthy. But he was just going down the line of every single piece of propaganda, trying to shove it into the brain of these business people. And he was a wormy fucker that's just that kind of guy. You could just look at him and go, yeah, you would sell your soul real fast, right? You'd probably get like $1.20 for it, So I've been inside places that would be viewed from the outside as being secret. You get inside and you're just like, Jesus, where's the door? I want to get out of this place. Not because it's eerie, because it's boring. But I want to go back to this conversation I had with this bartender who has many other skills, but this is one thing she does real well. I think the conversation came up about a person who was a Mormon in the conversation. And I thought it was interesting that I had never really put together in my life until this moment at this bar that religions are, and this is going to sound stupid, and then I'm going to put into perspective here. The religions have just as much secrecy as any of the secret societies that we despise. And yet, for whatever reason, because they've convinced us of their intent to be good, we write them a blank check. I just did the Finding God episode. And in that episode, I talk about the fact that, what is God? Forget what you've been told about God. Is God good or bad? Is he patient, impatient? Is he wrathful? Is he ever forgiving? And without being taught a stupid religion, you can answer those questions within just microseconds, as fast as your brain can throw out the answers. Your heart's telling your mouth what to say. It comes from that area. But once you get into indoctrinated religion, you're trying to look up in the Bible what to say. And that's sad as hell, right? When it comes to religions being secret and withholding information, you remember the old temples of Egypt were temples that were built in chambers, right? You had these concentric squares that would go out and build the temple. And the centermost chamber was only for the high priests. Some boy touching going on there, man. A lot of the ways that before Jesus came, supposedly, right? Before that story came, they slaughtered a lamb for your sins. And so there's an altar in the center of many of these temples, and they're literally cutting the crap open, cutting a lamb open, slaughtering it. The blood is going down a trough into a little gutter that then goes underneath all the walls and then spills out in the street for the public to see. And then the public would yell and scream and be happy because all of their sins have been forgiven by this lamb. I mean, just think about how fucking retarded does that sound. Oh yeah, we kill a lamb and then, God forgives you. That's the way God works. We're not very smart yet. Blows the mind that anyone can rationally say, well, yes, before Jesus we used to slaughter lambs and that's how it worked. And because it made sense, right? If we can just take observable reality for just 1 second and go, that's just batshit crazy. God is the Lamb and whatever. But since the beginning, temples have had these secret chambers in the middle. It's almost as if the devil himself designed the temples of the world to have secrecy, to covet information, to conceal. And it's built into the foundation of every modern religion nowadays. The only thing I don't know about is mosques. They seem to be pretty open buildings. You just kind of go in and there's a bunch of, mats for you to pray on. I don't know if there are secret chambers in their rigging. Judaism definitely has secrecy. Christianity has secrecy. I think in Buddhism, you're fighting to get the center pillow to sit on in the main hall. It's pretty much right in your face. The idea is if there's going to be a path to God, and it's really the byproduct of a God, just to take religion for an example, there would be absolutely no secrecy. Give me a break. Yeah, God's like, God, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get to heaven, but don't tell the other guy. Don't tell the other guy. It's a test. You don't have to take the test. You're the random guy I picked to go there. Just dumb. But the Mormons have had a very interesting brush with secrecy, in that the big temple in Los Angeles had a video revealed of all their secret weird handshakes. Apparently, and because I haven't been in these organizations, I don't know the exact details of it, but apparently if you kiss enough ass in their church, you go up and up and up in the echelons. You get to this super graduated, super secret, super elitist, superiority-ridden complex chamber where you learn all these handshakes. And their theory is that God's going to reach his hand through a curtain. And if you give the right handshake, you're sort of telling God, yeah, I know all about this little thing, and I know about that little thing, and I'm good like this, and I'm good like that. Now, think about that. Think about what they're trying to assert with some of that stuff. And, there's probably some of this I don't have completely right. Somebody learns the handshake, and you're a Mormon. All right. What forbids them, after that point, from being a real evil bastard? You know these handshakes, and then you become evil, but then you get to go to heaven, and when God sticks his hand through the curtain, I got all these handshakes. Almost like you want to play the James Bond song. Again, I think that the way that God has been defined by man, it makes God an enemy of man, to be honest, because the behavior of God through the eyes of man is reprehensibly man. It's illogical. And I think that secrecy is usually surrounding the origin of a bullshit story. I think one of the reasons why religions have coveted chambers and secret rocks and secret this and secret that is because once you look at the bullshit story that someone created a really long time ago, it's bullshit. These, was it the golden plates that supposedly Joseph Smith found in the forest or what, upstate New York? Well, the reason why you don't see them anymore is because someone supposedly took them away to keep them in good hiding. Guys, really? You really think that story's true? You just don't think the guy bullshitted about the plates, and because they don't exist, he creates a story, a backstory that he had them, and then he lies that people saw them, and that he translated them, and then they had to be taken back up to heaven. Because God's a real secret guy. Again, like I said in the Finding God episode, when you're visited by a deity, by an angel, by God himself, then you're on level 1. You're not a remarkable person. You're the most unremarkable person when it comes to believing in God, because you've seen it, you've touched it, you've felt it, right? But the secrecy is always there to shroud the bullshit with religion. But what about secret agencies and secret groups that are doing a lot of harm? Like physical harm to the world. Because if you think about religion, you don't have to join a religion. You don't. And, we're out of the days of the Inquisitions and the Crusades where they're going to walk into your front yard and point a gun at you and say, believe or else. Those days are over, thank God. If you're a Christian in the Middle East, it might be really close to that. As long as you're not next to a film studio, you won't have your head cut off. But what about a group that wants to do harm? The secrecy algorithm around that. I think it's just extremely valuable to break it all the way down to its fundamental particles, right? What kind of harm could someone do to you? I think there's 2, maybe 3 main categories. Let's do 3. They want to take what's yours. You have something and they want to take it away. Could be your land, could be your country, could be your stuff in your house. There's the formula of theft. Now, the only tear up from that, in my opinion, that is more encompassing is slavery. They want to enslave you, to trap you in a grind, which means a cyclical loop whereby you serve them constantly. And what's the third one? Third one is they want to kill you. They don't think you should exist, or your existence is a problem for them, and so they want to get rid of you. Now, the reason for secrecy in this particular realm is very different than religion. Religion is a self-created level, mechanism of superiority, right? I'm so insecure. I need to feel superior to you, and so I'm going to create this secrecy around this bullshit story. I'm going to trick enough people into being in part of my church that it starts to gain footing, and I get the little collections plate at the end of every Sunday. I call that the IQ test. If you're not smart enough to see through it, then you're stuck in it. There you go. But the second tier of it all has to do with common law. Do no harm. Now, when you argue the existential existence of God, you can't win or lose, really. You can't prove he doesn't exist. You can't prove he doesn't exist. If someone tells me someone existed 2,000 years ago that I don't think existed, well, it's just the battle of beliefs. Okay, well, then you do and I don't. Fine. Do no harm, right? Yeah, high five. Boom. But when it comes to someone just absolutely lasering in on doing harm, I'm going to steal your shit, I'm going to enslave you, and I'm going to kill you. I'm not sure there's a fourth. Those 3 will get us started really well. Well, the most dangerous version is the version that operates independently. But every single plan on planet Earth to operate under secrecy usually needs resources. Either someone willing to volunteer or someone who will take a paycheck for it, a mercenary. Now, I'm going to put forth that the more evil the plan is, the more secret the organization has to get. Not a big surprise, right? There's a place called Plum Island. And there was a fictional movie, was it The Island of Dr. Moreau, whatever. It's about Plum Island. Plum Island is probably, in my history, and nobody knows the absolute details, but Plum Island for me is probably one of the most terrific possible stories that could be told in Hollywood. Because you have genetic splicing on every conceivable level. And I'm not sure how many years or decades this place existed. But imagine taking the embryo of a human being and trying to mix in a spider. Any and all combinations of interspecies breeding was done on that island, as far as I know. But if it wasn't Plum Island, it definitely was done in some other crazy laboratory somewhere else, right? I think the masses missed the claim by China to be doing a head transplant. Imagine that. Would you announce you're going to do a head transplant before you've ever done it? Or would you do it over and over and over, and then say, oh, we can do head transplants. My belief is the latter. Now, if we're going to study evil intent, we need to study evil one more time, or we need to get a little refresher course here. When I took acting classes back in the day, I took the part of Othello, who's a black king, and one of my nemesis was my best friend, Iago. Iago is known to the Shakespearean writing community as the villain of all villains, because Iago was perfectly written to do two things: be perceived as a benign advisor to the king, whilst serving himself the entire time. The other beautiful quality of Iago, which is extremely important to understand if you're going to try to understand evil people, is that from the perspective of Iago, everything he was doing was to his benefit. So there, at no point did Iago ever feel like he was evil, but he was a manipulator. So I think it's interesting that when we're young, we look at, if you ever have an opportunity to talk to a bully or talk to someone who manipulated someone else, and you start to try and yell at them and go, how could you do that to someone else? You're more often than not looking at someone and talking to someone who even to the point you are discussing it with them, they don't think they've done anything wrong. In their mind, there was a clear objective, a clear benefit, and everything was entirely rationalized in them. Imagine a kid who also, does psychopathic crap like hurt animals when he's young or something, and then he gets rid of the animal hurting thing and he moves up to human beings, and maybe he regrets hurting the animals, but he's like, at least, I'm hurting humans now. It's so much better than hurting, little puppy dogs. But what you have to understand is that these people don't believe they're being evil. They believe they're doing what needs to be done. I truly believe that there are a tremendous amount of people that control the world per capita of their small group that believes that Africa needs to be exterminated. The native indigenous people. And I believe that their opinion is that continent just never pulled themselves out of the Stone Ages, and everyone else has, and you can't be controlled if all you care about is your mud hut and how high your spouse can jump. So they can't control that group. Plus, they're sitting on top of all this land, and so you have the Ace Ventura 2 plot of let's get the two warring faction, the two peaceful African villages to war against themselves, take themselves out, and then you could develop the land. But so we have three things, right? Take your shit, enslave you, and kill you. I'm going to suggest that most of all of the cabals in the world pretty much follow that formula chronologically speaking. The boom and bust cycles that we live in right now is an entire first phase scenario. Steal your shit. I had one of our commenters who posts a tremendous amount of fantastic comments, and he was listening to one of the episodes regarding me saying that hard work is luck. And he said, man, if hard work is luck, then I'd be a millionaire right now. And I tell you, brother, once you get to my other episodes, you'll hear that I have had the same thing. I've had my fortune stolen 3 times by the boom and bust cycle. It doesn't mean the formula doesn't work. It just means you got to get into the off cycle, such that when you work hard, it's in the boom phase, right? And what that really translates to, as soon as you get knocked down by a bust, start working your ass off on the next thing that should go boom. Just understand the boom and bust cycles happen every 6 to 8 years. So whatever you're doing needs to execute in 3 years. Then you'll be safe. Are these 3 cycles executed in linear fashion? I'm going to say hell no. At all moments of the day, right now, with these secret organizations, they are taking your shit. At the same time, they're enslaving you. At the same time, they're trying to kill you. Think about it. Stealing your shit. Well, they're degrading the value of your money. So if you have a 401k, it's just rotting. Go read Robert Kiyosaki's books, Cash Quadrant, if you want to understand the 401k system. He reads the book to you on audio, man. Just get the audiobook. But they boom and bust the cycle so bad that jobs come and go like crazy. And hey, the second you have to use your savings to survive, they're robbing that out of your pocket. You should have a job. You should have savings that just stays in your savings account. But man, have they ever got money figured out? You know, we give God the credit of knowing how the universe is put together and holding it together, regardless of what you think that is. Well, I would say that the money changers are gods of money. There's almost no avenue that they haven't figured out. You don't hear about Bitcoin anymore, do you? Crush that shit out of thin air, man. How many Bitcoins are there? Aren't there like 30 different Bitcoins? Bitcoin being one of the brands. I don't hear about it at all. Remember when everyone was rushing to switch to Bitcoin? It's gone. I mean, it still exists, but I'm sure most of those encryption algorithms have failed. How did they pull that off? That blows my mind. 2 years ago, people were buying sofas with Bitcoins, you know. When you're financially insolvent, you are a slave. A slave cannot determine their destiny. A slave has to go work 9 to 5 just to survive, right? When I say 9 to 5, I don't mean you working 9 to 5 for yourself. I mean, you got to work for someone else. Now, if you happen to find a great company and a great job that you love, then you're not a slave. You're doing what you love. And hopefully that's most of you. But then you have to ask yourself, if you didn't have to have money, what would you do with your life? If you say you're sitting on a beach your whole life, well, I would hope for you that would get extremely boring very quickly. And 2 months would be pretty quick. Any of you who've gotten a mortgage in your lifetime, you know what slavery is all about. Any of you who've had to borrow money, you know what slavery is all about. You've had debts, your credit card's maxed, you know what slavery is all about. Now, there's things that we impose on ourselves willingly, like having children. You don't view that as slavery because that is something that is wonderful. Big difference, right? I hear people make jokes about that all the time. Their spouses are, balls and chains, and their kids are, slave drivers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'd be careful of those kind of jokes. We don't want to degrade the one thing in life that's actually wonderful, right? Or could be wonderful. But then there's the death, right? There's the death. Well, we're fed GMOs, as we always talk about on this show. Our skies are sprayed with stuff that makes everyone sick on the same week. Our water's atrocious. Everything gives you cancer. Cancer is like the number one thing now. If you manage to escape cancer, you'll get hit by dementia or Alzheimer's. And seemingly 20 to 30 years before it should. We have drugs now. And it's not, like alcohol's a drug, people. What's really interesting is not being a drinker myself. When I have friends that are routine drinkers, let's just say, not necessarily alcoholics or anything. What's interesting about it is that their brain starts to go dead in their 50s. They have a lot of problems recalling things. They have major mood swings that they never used to have. They have anxiety that they never used to have. So how do we begin to combat secrecy? How do you do it? Because we know that the world is all divided up. I mean, my gosh, it's more versatile than any instrument you could possibly point to. Like I think I said before, when they asked Prince, when are you ever going to give up on music? And he said, well, there is a limitation for how many notes you can play in a certain combination. And about 10 years later, he said, I found a way to make it even more. So take all the dynamics of humanity. We're all at different stages of every single development cycle that could possibly happen. I would hate to even attempt to conceive of the diversity in thought process that could happen between Russians and Chinese and Americans and Africans and Australians. All of the races, all of the cultures, within every one of the states, the sub-states, the balkanized thoughts. Texas thinks different than California, than Massachusetts, than Kansas, than Montana. So the needs and the desires, especially if you listen to my politics episode, they vary greatly. The concept of the haves and the have-nots drives a tremendous amount of intent in this world. Well, imagine we go back to a Dust Bowl era where they can't grow a particular crop that's really sustained in an area for a really long time. But it's a cyclical thing. It'll burn off in 10 years, but for 10 years you're not making any money, and for whatever reason you're panicked. You don't have money in savings or whatever. And so then you have to go into one of these three algorithms of stealing someone else's stuff. Probably don't need to enslave them. Maybe you need to kill them to steal their stuff. And so you would have to plot in secrecy. Or you might have to trust humanity and then openly say, hey, the Dust Bowl thing, and my whole family and I, could you let us sleep here for a night? Can we work your fields? Because you're in a nice lush area in Florida. But then there's that Iago. The person that believes that they should have more than they actually have. And they can't resolve it through peaceful means. They can't simply work harder. They don't know what to do. Maybe they would work harder, but they just can't figure it out. Maybe they've been repressed, which is why they don't have as much as you. Maybe their neighborhoods have been packed full of crack cocaine for decades and decades and decades. And maybe they know that someone from your clan provides the drugs. And so in their mind, they're completely rationalized. They're like, look, you folks bring that stuff to my neighborhood. You hook all of our children on this stuff, even some of the parents. You put in a couple really, really wealthy drug dealers, which totally screws with the minds of kids that have to really get an education and really get a long-term job. Instead, they go for the short-term gain and they get a drive-by and they die. What if someone just totally sentiently worked that out, stopped warring amongst each other, and they said, look, it's payback time. There's two ways of being guilty of a crime. Actually engaging in the crime itself, and then there's the knowing that the crime is being committed, but not doing anything about it. So as much as the desires are diverse, I think the rationales are also diverse. The complex needs of someone lead to the complex desires of someone. How many times have you ever watched a little kid who's got a great set of toys, has everything that he or she asked for, and then some other kid comes in with that same amount of stuff and plus one toy? And that kid just happens to be getting off more on the extra toy than the first kid. And the first kid looks at the second kid and goes, you seem to be enjoying your toys way more than me. It must be that toy is actually much better than all the toys that I chose. I should have chosen a different toy. Well, I want to have that feeling you're having over there, so I'm going to come steal your toy. It's a perception game. You might have everything you need, but you don't think you have it. So we conspire in secrecy, because we know that if we were to tell you, hey, I want your toy, and you go, well, it's my toy. I'll share it with you, but I'm taking it home. No, I think I want your toy like all the time. I want to look at it 2 a.m. I go, no, it's my toy. I'm looking at it 2 a.m. Well, if you ask, you're going to get a denial, and you're going to have to either fight it out, or you're going to have to say, look over there, snatch. But now, what if we were to try to get rid of all this stuff? We're trying to get rid of every secret society. How the hell does that work? The first thing that pops into our brains typically is we'll pass some laws. We'll pass laws about secrecy. We'll say that the government can't keep anything secret as a matter of national defense. No one's records can be sealed. It's just going to be an open society. And if you happen to have that teen pregnancy that you didn't really want anyone to know. You got drunk one night and did something you weren't supposed to do. Maybe you were just accused of something that you never did, but you fought it in court and you won. But you'd rather not have the accusation be in anyone's mind because we know how society works. An accusation is pretty much judge and jury with a guilty verdict. I think you will see very quickly in your own mind that trying to open up society entirely, your own privacy, that may not work. You may not want that yourself, depending on how old you are especially. Now, this has happened several times in the world where secret societies have actually been banned in history. There have been many times, especially in the slave movement here in the United States, where we wouldn't let slaves congregate because they could talk among themselves and they could, or amongst themselves, they could plan something, a revolt of some sort. I don't know how prisons work, but I bet that's pretty close to the way a prison works, even though you can always get the word down the next guy. So if you're able to make any contact with someone, you can carry that word down. The idea. But in order to open up society, someone would have to push the reset button on everything that everyone's ever done, as if the policy had existed since you were born. And so that you could actually really think it through. I'm going to do this evil thing. Or I'm going to do something I think is fine, but it might be perceived as evil by someone else. But if I get caught, it becomes a matter of public record for the rest of my life, regardless if I'm a minor or an adult, whether I'm a Goldman Sachs CEO or a general. But now let me suggest this. Perhaps there are zones where we have no secrecy zones. Perhaps we define the magnitude of a congregation that is a zone in itself, a classification of a non-secret area. What if you worked for a government or a bank? And we simply said that if you're engaging in a service or product creation that is being sold to the masses, being 2 or more people, you have to be an open book organization, an intelligence agency, a military. And the further classification is, if what you engage in could do harm to another person, that is where we flick the switch on your open book designation. So an NFL team that wants to come up with a bunch of different plays, pass and run playbook, they don't have to reveal their pass and run playbook, because it's not doing harm to someone else. It's a game. But if you're a casino, and they're actually very upfront nowadays, and I think most people know how casinos run, which I really like. They would have to reveal all of the odds of every game that you're playing, which I believe they do now. I believe it's actually posted in the room somewhere. But let's say you play craps. I forgot how many ways you can bet on a craps table, but it's got the best odds in Vegas that I know, besides skilled poker playing. Because people can lose all of their life savings in this scheme, they force the gambling commissions to reveal odds. Now, what you don't get told is that the one-armed bandits that used to be pretty random are all predetermined, right? When they deliver a one-armed bandit, which is a slot machine, to any one of the casinos, it runs off microchips that actually have all the wins and losses pre-programmed in. So every time you hit the scramble circuit on a slot machine, it's going through the chip and just playing the win or loss. The machine is already guaranteeing the casino more wins for them and more losses for the people. And so it's it's just printing money. It's a foregone conclusion. The more that machine is used, the more the casino makes money, and the more you lose money, right? If this policy was international, the secrecy policy was international and enforced by the allies that would join this organization, not one world government, not a one world army, then we might have a hope of pulling this thing off. But as long as there's one significant faction that is not joining this agreement, then this agreement would not It would be dangerous for any country to get in and do it. And that's where they've got us by the balls. This whole thing of claiming national security, like I said in a previous episode, that is one of the oldest techniques of mankind. It's almost 2,000 years old in terms of being tracked back in the history books of a country saying, we can't tell you because it could do harm to your country. And don't you want your country to be safe? And you know what? In a lot of cases, they're telling you the complete truth. If our generals are to figure out techniques of protecting our borders, protecting our airspace and our seas, they can't publish that stuff. Because then the enemies could look at it and find vulnerabilities. And then we could have an invasion on our hands. So they have to hide this stuff from other folks. There can't be a little back door where someone says, well, I'm a citizen of the United States and I pay your salaries, so I want to see what those plans are and I'll sign all these disclaimers, yada, yada. You'd have to have an ankle bracelet. You'd have to be surveyed after you see that to make sure you don't double agent us, at some point in the future. You see how complex this gets? JFK gave the most amazing speech on secret societies right after Eisenhower gave his military-industrial complex secret society speech on his way out the door. And when you hear that, you knee-jerk to say, yes, there shouldn't be anything secret. And then you might say, well, we shouldn't have secret societies, especially with charter statements that say they're going to take over your country, like the Skull and Bones, that chartered itself on taking over the United States of America by all financial means necessary, which they did. Your Skull and Bones brought you the 16th Amendment, which is taxes on the people. They brought you the Federal Reserve, and they brought you a tremendous amount of the wars that we fought over the last 150 years, if not all of them. There are think tanks all around the world that plan war. They take a peaceful planet and they plan war. And in some cases, you'll have a big country like Russia who's minding its own business, trying to rebuild itself, trying to get into capitalistic prosperity like the United States has enjoyed for at least the last 100 years. And then the United States will just plan a war against them to hobble them, maybe to thin the herd in our country so there's less resistance. Who knows? In case this is new to you, the way that they do it is they have independent think tanks, very strategery people. They design a war. They design how the war can go down. And they're designing it just like we write movies. They write the end of the movie first, where they come out on top. And then they work backwards towards the front. They contact all the military industrial complex suppliers like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, sort of benign manufacturing companies to try and develop technology that they can use to fight the war. If there's any opportunities for resource management, they'll contact a Halliburton to mine the stuff out of the ground. And technically speaking, these organizations, unless they participate in the exercise of planning war, they're just a benign corporation that's profiting from someone else's devious plan. Imagine you make bullets. Imagine you make Kevlar vests, boots, canteens, and the government says, we want to buy $1 billion worth of this from you. It's the biggest sale of your life. Do you really sit around going, well, now, what is this being used for? No, you close the deal, you make the money, and you retire. Because that's what your whole life has been pining up to. But now imagine those items are used for some very devious plan. And someone's writing the history books and does a little bit of research and finds out you supplied them with a key ingredient to make the war possible. And now you're guilty by association. You seemed like you were in the secret society, but you weren't. I think JFK said it best when he said, we cannot tolerate secrecy in an open and free society. Again, I think that organizations that serve the public in critical strategic resource manners, such as banking, food manufacturing, water manufacturing, travel, military, we need transparency. Our politicians need to be transparent. But they're anything but, right? One of the methods that corporations use to remain secret is that almost every corporation in the world has competition. When you have competition, well, now Apple Computer, for instance, used to develop, actually, when Steve was alive, really cool shit. And it took years and years and years to pioneer this really cool stuff. And so they couldn't let anyone know that they didn't want anyone to know they were going in a particular direction. Hey, we're inventing this new thing off to the side, and no one is paying attention to this new thing. And so they work up their patents. And I believe the patent office has now developed a technique where you can patent in secrecy. A little terrifying. Now, I think that what could happen is that the secrecy patent technique could be a limited amount of time. You can file it, and then you get perhaps 6 months to a year of secrecy, and then your patent goes public. But you can't patent something and sit on it for 10, 20, 30 years and never reveal it. So maybe that's the way you can work it, and it's tolerable. But an attorney for a corporation can go into court and say, look, there's no way that we can reveal what we're doing, because that will give our competitors, who are less imaginative than us, the upper hand. Take China. China copies everything in the world. They outright steal everything, and they think it's actually a very admirable game. It's very interesting. If you're a socialist, you might believe in that, the redistribution of wealth and prosperity through theft. And I would say that one of the ways that you can be a socialist is to be not an inventor, not an entrepreneur, not someone trying to get ahead because you managed to make some connections. But you can easily take the other round, which I've taken with Stanley Myers, who was murdered for creating the hydrogen fracturing engine that was so utterly important to the world, that would have so utterly changed the world, that him living in secrecy for the better part of 15 years, developing his patents to fracture hydrogen out of tap water at a, 1 to 650 unit conversion, proven. He proved it to Oxford University professors. I had one of the commenters say, oh, that's all bullshit. And I was like, go look at the interviews with the professors that validated his claim. But how could we force, and do we want to force, someone who's created an invention that could change the world into giving it away for free? I think it was in my energy episode, which is one of my favorite episodes I've ever done. I was kind of angry in that episode. But I mentioned that if you're worried about not being wealthy by giving away something that can change the world and not making a profit, I would say that you would want for nothing if you truly benefited the world in a positive way. You just need to tell people you were the guy that did it, or the woman that did it. Now, you could cite Tesla as a odd case, but then he was a recluse. But he always seemed to find money until the very end, which I'm not sure. You know, people always talk about how Tesla was sort of destitute when he died, which is definitely the case. We know that he deserved to be a trillionaire. We know that that's what he deserved. But that's because we think that money is the greatest reward in the modern age. For a man of Tesla's intellect, you know, there was very few times in Tesla's life where he wasn't able to do exactly what he wanted to do, to borrow the money to create an experiment and prove his theories. So as an inventor, I think that Tesla won pretty much most of his life. He was screwed out of his patent. I wanted to make this episode for one specific reason. When I thought about being turned into some dictator of planet Earth that can do anything that I want, and I'm going to solve the problem of secrecy, about a microsecond later, I ran my face into a brick wall of having no clue of how to accomplish that goal. To really accomplish it without, swinging some Harry Potter wand and changing the world's opinion about things. We don't have any magic wands. So let me throw this other bumper at you at the end here. Now, the romantic story about who runs the world and who's at the top of the banking cartel families is the name Lord Rothschild comes up a lot. Now, when I really try to feel that name out in my own soul and look at all the research that I've done, I get this Kaiser Sose usual suspects feeling that perhaps the entire Rothschild dynasty and the history of the Rothschilds might be more folklore than real. Who knows? Maybe it's a straw man for us to run after. I think metaphorically speaking, we can lean on it because we look at the Bilderberg meetings and who arrives at these meetings, and there's individuals that work for the Rothschild Empire that seem to be the proxies that gain utter and complete access to all of the top officials that do arrive. The kings, the queens, they walk around the grounds with the Rothschild proxies. Henry Kissinger, before he looked like Violet Beauregard, walked around with these proxies. And so there seems to be some substance to this. But if you were one of these big family members or the top family member, and you also desired for the world to be in control, you might, and let's just say, let's enter the realm of suspension of disbelief, that these people weren't Satanists, that they don't have any real background in reptile alien stuff or anything weird or evil. Let's just give them that assumption for a split second. And you wanted to make the world a peaceful place. Now, it's no mystery that a sociopath doesn't know how to communicate with other people. The sociopath might have no means of talking to a homeless person or a person who's working but broke, or someone who fell uphill because they were part of some dot-com startup and now they're a billionaire. We have a lot of revered billionaires that if you go back and look at their individual contribution to the companies that were sold for multiple billions of dollars, they don't necessarily have the IQs that you think they have. But we revere them day to day as if they are the new Einsteins, you know. But anyway, you're this person and you want to make the world a better place. And slowly you start to be perceived as an Iago. Because when you try to approach society and say, what about this idea? A one world government that's good. You will want for nothing. You will all be employed. We'll have one world currency. And because we know that there's resistance to change, we're going to really up surveillance. We're going to have everyone either microchipped or carrying a chip or some equivalent thereof. But, I know I'm going to take that away as soon as everybody calms down and relaxes and we get to the Gene Roddenberry world. But it's going to be a tough change. And there's going to be resistance. And because you won't understand what I'm doing, I'm going to conduct my entire 100, 200-year plan in complete secrecy. Because those who resist change and those who are criminalistic about this change because the freedom allows them to engage in criminal behavior, because they exist, I have to operate in secrecy. By the way, I'm not trying to make this sound like a psyop in itself. I'm not trying to rationalize this shit. But you could see how these folks could convince themselves that what they're doing is exactly like the Ark of Iago. In their mind, they're bad communicators. They won't just lay the plan out to the public. And so they have all these secret societies, all these secret meetings where you get Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 that just came out recently. You get depopulation programs. And you can bring someone like Barack Obama behind a closed door, or Hillary Clinton, and you can lay out your plan. Not all of it, but a lot of it, the majority of it. You can say, you see how beautiful the world's going to be. And yeah, these people are going to think that we're taking their guns and trying to get rid of their sovereignty. But in the end, we're just trying to get rid of all guns. But we're going to actually have a really heavily armed global government army that's going to have to take them all away first. And no one's going to like pulling the Band-Aid off. But as soon as the Band-Aid's off and we start the healing process and these old generations die off because we're poisoning the shit out of this old generation. Gen Xers and up are all going to be poisoned to death. And we're going to give poisons to Gen Y kids. But we're designing the poison regiment to be you only take it if you're stupid. You know, you only drink diet sodas if you haven't learned about the low-hanging fruit that is aspartame. So anybody who doesn't do that much research and engage reality, they should die. For anybody that doesn't know GMO foods cause cancer, well, we're going to sterilize all the mothers that drink it or eat it, so they won't be able to have kids unless they're the 1 in 500 women that can eat all that stuff and still give birth. But even if they give kids, even if they have kids, we're going to vaccinate them the second they're alive. And only the smart parents are going to not vaccinate their kids. So those who survive are going to be those that we actually want around. Maybe. I don't think it's like this at all, just so that you know. I'm not trying to sell you on this. But I'm just trying to illustrate that in their brain, they may have come up with a plan that they believe in and that they can sell to people. There has to be a reason why Barack Obama is Iago. They believe in the greater good. With the George Bush, I just think the guy is so simple-minded. And no offense, probably a really nice guy to drink a beer with. I just think he didn't want to be involved with this shit at all. But he's a Bush. They needed one of the Bushes to go up and take the bullet, and he did. I'm not absolving him at all, man. I'm just saying he's a different personality than the rest of the presidents who will do shit very specifically, which we perceive as evil, right? Against man, doing harm. So here's what I want you to get out of this episode, if you even made it this far. When someone brings up secret societies, I think we need to start being grown-ups about the complexities of trying to erase secret societies. It's really difficult to try and pass laws to get rid of secret societies. It's just super difficult. If you're an attorney, or you know an attorney, you might have them watch this episode and just weigh in on the logical, legal mechanisms that could be used to distinguish a secret society that could affect society and a secret group of folks that just want to smoke cigars. We have to distinguish things. I think we have to figure out a methodology. Again, if we had a revolution and we won, what the hell does that mean? And how the hell could we rethrow the government? I mean, what if we got damn near everything we asked for? Almost everything we asked for, but we didn't make a provision for secret societies. Say we even got rid of all the intelligence agencies, or we didn't get rid of them, but we made them open book. FBI, CIA, NSA. We made them all open book so we could see what they were doing. Right? Remember the coup of Russia? They exposed the KGB. Went through all their records. What about the group of businessmen that just may have we're taking over the Bronx and we're going to tear it all down and build it up to be the next Atlantic City? Whatever it is. The NAMBLA 2.0 wants to touch kids. Organizations that have protected pedophiles. Maybe we just throw them out. Say, if that country lets you touch boys, that's fine. But what we're going to do is we're going to expose to the entire world everything that you've done. And when you move to the other country, we'll hand the dossier off to the other State Department at their side, and they can make the educated decision whether or not boy touching is something they don't care about. There's evidence, and I won't name it, but there's evidence that at least 2 countries that I know of farm boys out to businessmen. They look the other way. They get paid off. I don't know what it is. Maybe they do it themselves. Shit, I don't know. I don't have a solution. I just have my perception of how utterly complex and tricky and catch-22 ridden the idea of getting rid of secret societies and secret organizations is. If we have the experiment of America in full-blown, full tilt, and we want to protect it, we cannot expose the way that we protect it, such as someone could take it away. I think you feel me. I apologize for this being really, really chaotic, but hopefully you guys can weigh in on this. I'm literally waiting. I have waited, I should say, one for my own brain to kind of decipher this stuff out. And this woman at the bar just made it completely. She just opened it up to the point I could actually see a train of thought to have a deep thoughts about it. But I have so many of you that are so utterly intelligent and well researched, and you come from all walks of beliefs too. And I want to say, not that you've made it this far, if you're a Christian and you're watching this and you've still tolerated my lack of complete and Christian endorsement, I have to say you are an amazing person to listen to someone disagree. And you would be like my guys that I smoke with, where we have all kinds of different belief systems when it comes down to those type of things. But please weigh in from your perspective, and let's see if we can't crack this thing open. Maybe I'll do a part 2 later on. We'll solve all the world's problems one episode at a time. But they'll actually be looking in the comments for the real resolutions, not my video. So, anyway, if you haven't gone to mkultraradio.com, as I always say, those are where the feeds are. There's video, there's audio. Take your pick. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.